to Leader You by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Shelley Paxton. She is the former Chief Marketing Officer at Harley-Davidson, and she's a speaker, an advocate, and a best-selling author. Think Brene Brown meets Biker Babe with a dash of Liz Gilbert. Shelley is a 26-year advertising and marketing veteran whose legacy is imprinted on iconic global brands like McDonald's, Visa, and Harley-Davidson. At the pinnacle of her career as Chief Marketing Officer at Harley-Davidson, she was shocked to find herself feeling success empty instead of success full. That awakening led her on a profound journey that became her mission, business, and her best-selling book, which is amazing, Soulbbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. Now Chief Soul Officer, she works with leaders and teams to advocate for redefining success in ways that celebrate humanity, well-being, and soul. Her influential work is empowering antidote to corporate burnout, attrition, and disengagement. It's gained recognition on platforms like NBC, CBS, Forbes Inc., and Thrive Global, making her a respected thought leader, advisor, and sought-after keynote speaker who's been called the next Brene Brown by Chip Conley. New York Times best-selling author, former Airbnb exec, and founder of Modern Elder Academy, which is how we got to know one another. Her signature keynote, Where Soul Meets Success, a New Leadership Roadmap, is Inspiring Ripples of Impact, the New ROI in Lives, Business, and Cultures. Shelley is on a mission to liberate 1 billion souls to live a more bold, brave, and badass. She's based in Chicago and obsessed with mental health advocacy and in the color orange. So for more information, you're going to get to dive into a soulful conversation and learn all about Shelley and why I wanted to have her on the Leader You podcast, because she is a badass. She kind of scares me a little bit, which is in a good way, in a way that lights a fire. Stay tuned for this amazing soul-filled conversation. Thank you for being here, Shelley.
Oh, thank you. I feel like we are badass soul sisters. So yeah, I mean, let's kind of challenge and inspire and maybe terrify each other a little bit. I love it.
Yeah, when I read your book, so I learned about you through Modern Elder Academy. I did one of the free little workshops that you did talking about Soulbbatical, and that's when I downloaded your book instantly because my husband had started his sabbatical, and we were going to be doing some travels, and so we started listening to your book on a road trip. And I remember you had posted something on LinkedIn, and Rob was like, "We're listening to your book right now," and we were really moved because this is the kind of work that we're in line with. And we were listening to your story and what you're trying to do and liberate 1 billion souls. And I just got super curious. And I was like, I want to know more. So after listening to your book, I was on fire. And I just literally reached out to you and said, tell me more. I want to know more about you. And I pretty much opened up with a heartfelt how you moved my spirit. And then you reached right back out. And so that's how this all began, right?
Yes, and thank you. Thank you. I mean, I say this to anybody listening, if this moves you in any way, please share your story, connect with me. There's nothing, especially as an author and as somebody who has put her heart and soul out in the world in a very raw and vulnerable way. I love nothing more than to know it's having an impact and it is helping others to live their bravest, boldest, most badass life as well. So thank you, Angie, for doing that, for you and Rob telling me how it was having an impact. I mean, listen, that's why I say we are the ripples of impact. Like the more of us who are showing up in the world in our in a way that, infuses more humanity and well-being and soul into what we do and how we show up, the more our companies are going to shift and culture is going to shift. So, yeah, let's do this together.
Yes, I love that. I love the fact that you call yourself the chief soul officer, and I have stolen that for myself because I want to be the chief soul officer not only of my life, but of our business. And I really resonated with that term, and I can't believe I didn't ever think of it when our tagline is work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. So
Yes.
tell me how you came up with that.
Yeah, well, it's funny to speak about it now, 7+ years later. When I first came up with it, honestly, Angie, it was out of sheer desperation. And maybe this is a good place to give a little bit of my backstory, because my backstory absolutely supports how and why I came up with that term that for me as well has become the most important title I've ever held. And I offer it to you and anyone and everyone else who it resonates with. But the backstory is this. Like you said, I mean, you gave a brilliant description of my background, my 26 years in advertising and marketing, and being the steward of so many iconic brands and getting to the top of that proverbial mountain and going, wait a second, is this all there is? And feeling something that I never expected to feel. That, I was following my dad's script of success and the societal script of success that says, pick all of these boxes and you're going to have it made, and the boxes were the very traditional ones, bigger titles and more money and all of the accolades and the promotions and all of it. And I'm not saying those things are bad. What I'm saying is get really, really clear on what matters most to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I did all those things and I ticked all those boxes and I found myself in, I mean, let's face it, as a marketer, one of the sexiest, if not the sexiest job in marketing. Became the CMO of Harley-Davidson. I rode motorcycles around the world for a living. And so I had this extreme guilt. I was like, how am I waking up going, is this all there is? Everyone around me is telling me I've made it. You've made it. This is success, putting me on a pedestal. And I would wake up and I was exhausted. I was burned out. I was drinking myself to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I was empty and unfulfilled. And yet I was like, but what else do you do? This is everything I was taught. And this is what I was conditioned to believe is
Mm-hmm.
success, without ever checking in with me, without ever checking in inside and saying, what does matter to me? What are my values? What is my currency for success? And so, without having done any of that internal work, I was always looking outside. And now I'm so clear that it's choosing values over validation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Choosing what's inside versus what's outside.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I didn't. And for anybody listening to this, no shame and no judgment. I was there.
Yeah.
And so, the reason I tell my story and the reason that I ended up leaving Harley is, one, I had this huge nightmare. I really believe it was the universe and my soul conspiring
Mm-hmm.
to wake me up, to make me pay attention to what I was missing. And what I was missing is the fact that I was completely disconnected with my own soul, my own truth, my own essence. And so the nightmare haunted me for my whole final year at Harley. It is also one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given, because it set me on this path forward when I started to understand that I needed to spend some time looking inwards. I needed to, the nightmare basically is, you know it well, but I won't spoil it for everybody listening because the book starts there. But the idea is basically this: what I was seeing in my nightmare was a proxy for my soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I was letting my soul die. And so it was the big cosmic kick in the pants to say, oh my gosh, by the time I get to 50, do I still want to be feeling this way? Do I want to be a shell of myself? Or do I want to wake up every day energized and powerful and as my best self? And so that set in motion what I called my Soulbbatical, which is also the name of my book. And it kind of forced me to explain to the world what I was doing. So I gave myself a title. because at the time I was so sensitive to titles and I thought they were so important. And I was like, well, you know what? If I call myself chief soul officer, then I know I'll have an obligation to listening deeply
Hmm.
and to understanding what my soul is saying to me and to start to navigate toward that. So that was the beginning. And now it is a lot of things have changed and evolved over time, but I've never let go of that title and I never will.
Oh, I have goosebumps. We're in the soul stuff now. This is where it gets juicy and good conversation because really that's what I feel. I feel when I listen to your book, when I've listened to your podcast, when I've met with you previously and just learned what you're about and what you're for. I hear all of it in your language. I see that you are really showing up for yourself in a way that is intrinsic, which is in society, everything is extrinsic. So when I get this, I'll be happy. When I'm chasing the carrot, right? Extrinsic motivators, extrinsic things, titles, all of these. We know that when we get to them, we actually aren't happy if we're not happy with ourselves where we are now and we're not checking in with our soul and what matters most. And I think this is what's going to be most helpful for our listeners is some of them may have never hit pause on their life. They might just be in the rut, feeling stuck, feeling like, is this all there is? Right?
Mm. Yeah, and one thing I want people to know is like you're not alone. I honestly wrote this book and I'm on this mission and in this work every day. Not only as a reminder to myself, but to all of us that we're not alone. We get to do this together because I felt so alone. Nobody was having this conversation. When I was
Right.
experiencing everything I just described at Harley, I was basically pulling myself up by the bootstraps every day, putting on all the armor and all the shiny stuff. And in my case, it was like the badass leather jacket and the boots and the jewelry and the accessories and the fancy stuff. And, trying to pretend it was all okay because no one was having this conversation. And now we're further down the line where we are having real conversations about well being and mental health and burnout. And
Mhm.
so, I just want to normalize
Yeah.
this conversation and normalize the idea that we can, whether you're in corporate, in transition, an entrepreneur, in education, wherever you are listening to this right now, you can live successful and not success empty.
Absolutely.
Period. And I actually wrote, Angie, I think you've heard me talk about this, and there was some definition. I don't know if it's this exact definition because it's evolved over time, but I wrote a definition for the word successful. And I'd love to read it right now just
Yeah.
because I feel like it lays the foundation and addresses exactly what you just said. And so I wrote it as it's courageously defining success on your own terms
Hmm.
and in a way that feels fulfilling from the inside out.
Absolutely.
Exactly what you just said, right? So this is basically it's accomplishment and alignment. It's accomplishment and impact that are aligned with your truth.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot in that, but we get to write our success script. And I think for so long, for so many of us, we were handed something from our parents, from our culture, from our community, from our religion. I mean, it goes on that
Hmm.
says, this is success. And it's like, well, is it? I mean, for a long time it was, and it was very patriarchy driven
Yes.
as well. And now we get to be a part of the shift in that narrative and the normalizing of this kind of conversation. So no, you're not alone.
Absolutely. And we're both space creators, right? Creating space and grace for people to pause and to think about and to reflect and to really get in touch with themselves and recognize that all of us go through some dark night of the soul where we are faced with some serious pain. Um, Pain is a
Yeah.
great motivator for change. And so if anybody is listening and they're in a suck fest right now, or they're chasing this sapping hustle culture that has us running and on the hedonic treadmill, this may be a time for you to press pause. If this is really in your soul, it's time to dig into it and find out what matters most to you, what your values are, because your values shift over time. Your definition of success shifts over time. And today might be the day where you write that script, what that looks like, what success looks like to you. For me, in this stage of life, success looks like peace. It looks like freedom. It looks like, freedom in my time and the things I get to do and the things that I love and creativity, where early in life it was very externally motivated because you wanted to gain worth and hustle for your worth and have the title and all those things. So I'm curious how the feelings, since I do a lot of work in the emotional space and we're both passionate about emotional health and mental health, how did the feelings of guilt and shame for not being grateful or not being, like this job, you have this amazing job and you have this career. How did you manage those difficult feelings of shame or guilt for maybe how other people might perceive you?
Yeah, well, I want to answer the question in two ways. One, I want to back up to just this idea of feelings. It's so incredibly powerful. This notion, I believe that success is a feeling, not a checklist. And you just nailed it in the way that you described it. So I didn't want to let that
Yeah.
go by without putting a finer point on it, because the more of us who are able to think about what do we want more of in our lives? What feeling do you want more, like you said, freedom, more joy, more connection, more health
Mm-hmm.
and well-being than a lot of people are feeling right now? You get to fill in the blank and explore what do you want more of, and it doesn't have to be only one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you can explore your values and how does success align with your values in terms of what you want more of. So one, I wanted to say that because I just think to me, that was an epiphany that I had on the way, where I was like, oh my God, wait a second. Success is a feeling. No one ever taught me that. Where did that come from? So it put a huge smile on my face to hear you talk about feelings, and, to know that's, yet again, another area where our work is so aligned, and that lights me up. To answer your question about, these feelings of guilt, primarily, I will admit that as I got deeper and deeper into having this nightmare that I started to describe, but I'm not going into full detail on, only because I don't want to take away the like
Yeah.
the sucking in of the book, because it is where it starts and it is
Mm-hmm.
really powerful. I will say this though. I got 3-4 months into this, and reminder, I was having this nightmare my entire final year at Harley-Davidson. So 3 to 4 months in, imagine every night I'm waking up at 2 a.m. having seen the exact same thing. I'm emotionally drained. I'm physically drained. I'm not sleeping. So sleep deprived 3 to 4 months into this, I was hardly functioning. I
Mm-hmm.
was pretending,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying to show up like nothing was wrong with me,
Yeah.
and I wasn't asking for help, until I finally got to the point where I'm like, I need help, or something very, very bad is going to happen
Mm-hmm.
to me. I'm going to be that person who drops dead at age 46. I'm going to be that person who, gets the health crisis kick in the butt that will finally force you to change the thing, or,
Mm-hmm.
some other cosmic kick in the pants, right? So as I was feeling all of those things and not feeling like I could talk to anybody about them, or I turned to professional help.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a doctor who was an integrative medicine doctor who also believed in Eastern medicine practices. And he was the very first person in my life at 45 years old to introduce me to the idea of mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
the holistic idea of well-being,
Yep.
and to the notion of meditation. And I'm not professing even now, 7 years later, that that's going to solve all of your problems. I am saying we've got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big believer that every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. So figure out what's the one tiny step you want to take forward. And for me, one tiny step was asking for help.
Mm-hmm. That's a
And
huge
so
step. That's
it's
a
a
vulnerable step.
huge, it is. And so I say tiny step to say, yeah, it felt fairly overwhelming to me at the time, but I was also desperate in the same way I was desperate to create a title for myself. Before I did that, I was desperate to not feel the way. And I believe there's an old adage, and I never do, or it's a story. I never do a great job of it, but it's like you'll only get off the rusty nail when it hurts bad enough. I think it's a story about a farmer's dog who keeps sitting on the rusty nail and howling and howling, and the neighbor is like, "What's wrong with your dog? He's like sitting on a rusty nail." And he's like, "Well, why doesn't he just get off the rusty nail?"
Yeah.
And the farmer's like, "Doesn't hurt bad enough."
Yeah.
And that has always stuck with me. And there's, I guess, the correlation that I cite more often is a beautiful piece of poetry from Anais Nin. And it's one that really guided me in the early days of this exploration and this work. And she basically talks about the idea that, I think it's, and then the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was greater than the risk to blossom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what this is. So as I started to understand that this was a turning point, this was my chance to blossom, this was my chance to do some potentially life-changing exploration, I had to just live with the discomfort of the guilt and the
Mm-hmm.
discomfort um that, like, I guess most of it was guilt, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt and privilege were probably the biggest things I was feeling in the moment. And I had to recognize that I knew I would be able to process those eventually, but I had work to do and I had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I know that was super long winded, but that was like, it tells you a little bit more about my journey. I just had to start stepping into it
Mm-hmm.
and let myself be in the suck of it and in the discomfort. Otherwise, I was just going to be stuck there forever.
Yeah. I call it sitting in the suck. Right.
Yeah.
And that is actually feeling the feelings, and feelings aren't bad. They just are. They're just something that comes over us. They pass, but we have to acknowledge that they're there, and also not shame ourselves for having the feelings about feeling guilty, or like recognize it's part of our humanity. It's part of our soul speaking to us to let us know what we might do differently. You said desperate. You were desperate for change. And that is what pain does for us. When you start to feel these discomfort, these uncomfortable feelings, they may be signposts or signals or rusty nails or thorns in your side or weeds in
Yeah.
your garden that need attention. They need some
Totally.
attention. They're signaling to you,
Totally.
what do I need? What do you need? And this is your soul calling for you.
Yes. And I want to connect the dots to something you said earlier, between that and when you talked about pause. Because often when somebody will say to me, like, I don't know what to do, I feel so overwhelmed, I'm feeling the suck, I'm in the suck,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, but I'm paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. I just say, slow down.
Breathe.
Slow down and breathe. Not only breathe, yes, that's a starting point. Listen deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Because we tell ourselves so many stories about keeping up, and this hustle and grind culture and wearing busyness as a badge of honor is more deeply ingrained in all of us than we
Oh,
know.
for sure. For sure.
Right? I still catch myself in it every day, and I've been in this work for 7 years.
Yep.
Right? And it's because we're human, and it's because like those stories got into us at a cellular level.
They're the
And it
ruts.
takes
They're the ruts that you have to work to get
totally,
out of, right?
totally.
Yeah.
So one, don't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
Two, breathe and slow down. And three, listen deeply and give yourself permission. And if you need help, this is something I talk about all the time. Write yourself a permission slip. So I'm holding up, if you're listening and not seeing, I'm holding up an orange Post-it note because orange happens to be my favorite color. I think you said that in my
Yeah.
bio, Angie. And what I do every single day, this is one of my well-being practices, is I ask myself this question so I can give myself permission for what I need. I say, in order to allow myself to show up as my most bold, brave, badass self today, what do I need to do, not do, or feel?
Mm-hmm.
Do, not do, or feel, or it's and or. It might be one of those things. It might be all of those things. On some days, it might be one permission slip. And on other days, it's like 12 and they're all over my workspace and my refrigerator, my bathroom mirror.
I love that.
So do what you got to do. But I think it's a beautiful reminder to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's for 1 minute or 2 minutes every morning, to check in and listen deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And then to allow yourself in ways you probably haven't allowed yourself before to prioritize what you need. I was just giving this example yesterday. I was filming, I think I told you I was filming for CBS News, a mental health
Mm-hmm.
segment. And I was like, how often do we give ourselves permission to say, you know what? I'm not doing this next meeting as a Zoom. I, for my own well being, need to get up and move. I need to be out from behind a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this as an old fashioned phone call, walk and talk.
Yeah.
I do that more often now. I probably do that 2 or 3 times a week. I'm not doing it every day, all day.
Yeah.
I get sometimes they're group meetings and we have to be on them. And so, but you would be hard pressed to tell yourself a story that you can't at least do this 2 or 3
Yeah.
times a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you get out from behind. So say, I give myself permission to do 3 walk and talks or 1 walk and talk today instead of being behind my computer.
Mm-hmm.
Or I give myself permission to rest my eyes and be in quiet for 20 minutes
Absolutely.
at some point today. I mean, come up with any example. Give yourself the afternoon off. But the bigger idea behind this too is when you said pause earlier, I think it's easy to hear that word. And then you said Rob was taking a sabbatical and Shelley took a Soulbbatical. And it's easy to go into this place of saying, yeah, but I don't have a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have 3 months or 6 months, or God forbid, I have 12 months. And I really want to like drive this home. That's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
Take 20 minutes today. Take 15 minutes tomorrow. Take a long weekend every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you can do to create these micro moments of pause in your life.
Yes.
To listen deeply, and you will be rewarded with the magic that happens as a result and the clarity of those tiny steps that come.
Absolutely. Look at your calendar, put those things in. We usually do those at the beginning of the year, where it's like, let's look at every 3 weeks, what are we going to do? Because you can easily get in the rut and not find yourself getting out of it and just getting into old habits and rituals that may not be serving you, but you don't even know it because you're just going in autopilot, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what would you say to somebody that has the excuses or is telling the stories or the justifications for, well, I don't have this time. That might be nice for you, but how would you help them see that it starts little? You have to start small before you can do big things.
Yeah, in addition to everything we've already talked about, every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps. I don't think there's a single person who couldn't say one tiny step they're willing to take today in service of their well-being and their values. This is the question to answer maybe more pointedly and a little bit more provocatively
Yeah.
what you just said. This is the question I ask everyone. I do this on stage. I've done this in groups, retreats, one-on-one clients. I will literally look you dead in the eye and say, what are you pretending not to know?
That's one of my favorite questions, and I cannot. It doesn't matter what time in my life I hear it, it always resonates. Always. And I'm just,
It just changes what the thing is, right? But to this day, like I could tell you 5 things right now in my life I'm pretending not to know, right? And
tell me
it will
one. Tell
forever and
us one.
always be, oh my God.
One thing
So,
you're pretending not to know.
okay, I'm just, my only hesitation is I was like, oof, how vulnerable do I want to be? Um, I am pretending not to know that I could be creating the space to be writing my second book right now. And I'm not. I'm filling that space with other things that I'm saying are important, but they're not. And they're
Mm.
not as high a priority as me getting ahead of my book and or getting ahead on my book and really declaring myself. There are 2 things in this world I know I love to do. And when I look at my calendar, I'm like, huh, Shelley, that's interesting. Is your calendar fully aligned to these 2 things you know? My 2 things are speaking and writing. I'm clear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm clear. Podcasting would be the third one, and I'm not even doing that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking and writing. Why is everything on my calendar not fully aligned to speaking and writing?
Ew, that is so
It,
vulnerable.
oh, I'm
Shit.
sitting in it right now. I'm just sitting in that because I know, and I honestly have. So let me play that out just a little bit further. I feel like this was a test from the universe. This just happened within the past 2 days. So this is brand new
Mm-hmm.
as you and I are talking. I am part of this really powerful, high profile speaking community. I joined it because I am putting my money where my mouth is, and I was like, Shelley, then you go big or go broke. But girl, if speaking and writing are your 2 biggest things, and you want to really light a fire under your speaking, be on more stages, bigger stages, have more impact in this world, then sign up. So I'm part of this amazing community called Impact 11, and one of the co-founders reached out to me. I'm brand new to this community. I started at the end of January, and he said, I have an opportunity for you. The people who know you in this community have been singing your praises loudly. I would love for you to do this thing that happens to be in Chicago in your backyard with me in May. And I was like, I was seeing stars. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, this is amazing. I'm already on the radar of one of the co-founders. Fast forward, I said, yes, I happen to be available on that date. He told me what the fee is. I was like, yes, I'm willing to do it for that fee, whatever. I never got clarity on what I was meant to be talking about. I had assumed that my work got communicated clearly to him. He's never seen me speak. Just the other day, we get the green light and he sends me my assignment, this kind of keynote slash workshop thing. And I read it and everything inside me died.
Mm.
Everything inside me died. And I sat there and I was like, oh my God. Okay, well, let me sleep on the idea. Could I take some of my principles and maneuver them a few degrees, bring people in the door that way, whatever. Yeah, there was a lot of ways I could do it, but none of them felt right and none of them felt like a hell yes. And so I knew I was being called to say, yeah, this all sounds sexy to do because you want a relationship with this guy and you would love the paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
but none of it is aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot of stress and a lot of energy and a lot of time spent on something that's taking away from all of these other things you want to be doing. And
Mm.
I said, no.
I can feel the energy, the soul suck. Like that is like you're not in it.
No, and I will tell you, I say that out loud, it still gives me goosebumps because I got a note back. I wrote a heartfelt like very soulful note to him. And just told him how much gratitude I had for him making the invitation and trusting me and the reasons why it wasn't right. It wasn't going to look good for him and it wasn't going to look good for me. And he and this other woman who had recommended me both came back and they said, wow, your courage and integrity is off the charts. You would be very surprised the number of people who will say yes to anything for a paycheck and to look good for this guy.
Oh, wow. That is so good.
So I say this out loud, one, to remind myself I know it was the right thing, and two, for everyone listening, these things are going to be hard.
Hmm.
These decisions are not easy because you are inevitably saying no to something. But please remember, when you are saying no to that something, it's because you are saying yes to what you want more of. And we can all create that. We can all say more no's to embrace the yeses of what we want to come.
Preach. I love that you said a moment ago, it wasn't a hell yes. And that is a way that I check in with myself because I'm a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah.
And I have to ask myself when I'm going over something, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? If I say no to this, what does it create space for? Everything is cause and effect. And
Yes.
sometimes when especially if you come from, this people pleasing kind of mindset, then you might say yes to things you don't even want to do or don't align with your values. And if you're not clear on your values and you haven't taken the time to focus on what you actually value, how do what you say and what you do align with those things? That's when we get all off, start to let our
Yes.
soul just get sucked, right?
Yes. 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 Exactly. I got no more to add. Beautifully said. And it's just a reminder, everybody listening, like, this is the work. This
Hmm.
is the work. And it is so immensely rewarding when you take those tiny steps, one after the other, and you feel that momentum and you feel those doors opening and you feel those opportunities.
Hmm.
Life in your, life is life, right? In all facets of your life starting to really align. I mean, I really believe that we all have the opportunity to live success that feels more energizing and less exhausting. And this is everything we just talked about is a way to keep fueling that energy. Like we
Hmm.
fuel the energy by fueling our souls and making these kinds of decisions. And yeah, no has got to be a part of it. It just has to be
Absolutely.
in the boundaries you create, in the decisions you make, in what you say. I always say, I learned this from a coach back in the day. He said, it's a hell, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Hmm.
There's a hell yes, a hell no, and there's no such thing as a hell maybe.
Yeah,
And I
I
say that
love
all the
that
time.
one. There's
But honestly, I was living a life. And I think so many of us are living these lives where it's like, yeah, maybe.
maybe.
And we get into all this justification and we create these hell maybes in our lives. And all we're doing is creating more reasons why we can't do the thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Our distractions keep us from the things that are most important. What are you doing if you're not writing or, what you're in your case, you said you're not speaking and you're not writing. What are you doing? What are you being
Yeah,
distracted by?
I am. It's just that I want to create more space to do. I'm doing more
Yeah.
speaking. I am not writing as much
Gee.
as I want.
Mm.
And so creating space, I'm like, okay, well, look at where you're spending time. Like, I don't do a ton of one-on-one coaching. Like somebody said, what is your business right now? I would say it's speaking and it's writing and it's workshops. And those workshops take on a lot of different things. Some of them are corporate workshops. Some of them are amazing retreats at places like Modern Elder Academy, where
Yeah.
you and I met,
Yeah.
right? So that's where it is. On Friday, I'm going to talk to a group of grad students, a class of grad students at Northwestern University. Like that's the stuff that lights me up,
Hmm.
right? Like I want to pay it forward. I want to share all of this. So anything that's not in service of what I just described needs to come off my calendar, period.
Absolutely. And writing that permission slip. One of the things that you say is that authenticity is our truest form of rebellion. And one of the questions you ask is, what are you rebelling for? And I love those. So you want to kind of elaborate on what you mean by that or what that means to you?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, what are you rebelling for is tattooed on my forearm. It is, I mean, if you ever needed proof of how much it means to me and how central it is to my life and my work. So let me explain it and why it's important for me. I realize so much of my work is about being a rebel. I've been a rebel my whole life. The epiphany I had on this Soulbbatical journey, excuse me, is that I spent so much of my life rebelling against. When I looked back at my, especially my youth, oh my God, I was rebelling against my parents and religion and authority and blah, blah, blah. I could, read you a Dead Scrolls long list,
This is
right?
why we're soul sisters.
Totally, totally. And I mean, my rebel souls always find me
Yeah.
or I find them, right?
Yes.
So I realized, and then I was like, well, wait a second. That's exhausting and that's disempowering and that's playing on someone else's terms. And what hit me like a lightning bolt was this idea of rebelling for. So if we take what we're passionate about, that inside, like what matters most to us, who we are, what we want, the impact we want to have in our life, our business, the world, and we are leaning into it, that's empowering. It's energizing. It's forward momentum. And I just thought, oh my God, that's it. And the big question is, what are you rebelling for? It's where I kind of bring everybody home in my keynotes to say that's the beginning of your script, that you are declaring what is most important to you, what you really want to, get in forward motion around, because we all need that foundation and that sort of like guiding that North Star or inner compass or whatever you want to call it. So that's the idea behind what are you rebelling for. I think part of my mission is to give rebel this positive connotation. I've even given, like, I say, most people don't think it, but Michelle Obama, Brene Brown, Ariana Huffington, Simone Biles, they're all rebels because they are rebelling for, in their own way, things that matter and are making a difference in our world. And it's not James Dean, with this, his arms crossed and his old, kind of being the outsider and the troublemaker in the leather jacket. I mean, you might love leather. That's totally cool too. I do. But the connotation and the idea is that we get to be in forward motion and we get to rebel for what matters most for us. And in fact, little teaser, I'm using that phrase as the title for my workbook that hasn't yet come out, but Soulbbatical is coming out in paperback May 28th. That's up for pre-order now. And my workbook is going to be called What Are You Rebelling For? A Soulbbatical companion.
Yeah.
And it's digging into more of this work, the questions and the ideas and the exercises and the tools, so you can really get in and say, what does this mean in my life? How do I want to move this forward in my life? So that's what it is. It's helping you to get in motion. And honestly, authenticity is the truest form of rebellion, means we get to do this on our terms and in our own way, especially in a world that's trying to put us in boxes. We don't belong in boxes. So the world doesn't want us to be our own people, rebelling for our own things. And we get to. That's what authenticity truly is. It's being you.
And it brings us back to ourselves and to one another. And that is where we get into the connection of getting to connection with others when we're in connection with ourselves. And that
Yeah.
whole authenticity piece is a part of that. And finding out, becoming more self-aware, understanding what matters to you most, where your blind spots are, what your self-limiting beliefs are. All of these things. The journey, it's hard and it's scary, but it's so worth the time and the effort and the investment that it takes to get to the place where you're living in this place where you feel invigorated versus soul sucked on a daily basis or
Hmm.
constantly feeling overwhelmed. That's not a healthy place to stay. It,
It's not sustainable, period.
no.
No, you're exactly right. It's not sustainable. So we can tell ourselves a lot of stories, but we're going to get the cosmic kick in the pants at
Mm,
some point. If the pandemic was it for a lot of people,
mhm,
but then, some of us have to learn the hard way, right? It's illness, it's tragedy, it's loss, it's layoff, it's
mhm,
whatever it is. And we're usually grateful, like you said, these things, that pain is often the biggest gift you'll ever be given because it gets you in motion, it
mhm.
gets you listening, it gets you reconnected with yourself. a
Yeah.
hundred percent.
Yeah. If you're sitting on a rusty nail right now and it's uncomfortable, this is, you don't have to wait till it's piercing through your spleen. You could literally say, I want mercy right now. What can I do? How can I pause? How can I get curious and not judgmental with yourself? I think the key is not being judgmental of yourself and giving yourself that space to just reflect, get deeper, ask the questions, journal it out, talk with a friend, get some counseling, have a supportive network, right?
Yes. Yeah, up leveling my community. I mean, one of the reasons I think I was having, I felt so alone when I was at Harley in the initial stages of experiencing all of this was that I was in an echo chamber of
Hmm.
people who were defining success in the exact same way that was no longer serving me.
Right.
And so when I started to break out of that and listen deeply and get more true to like, my soul, my values, my essence, what mattered to me, I was like, oh man, okay, I need to really start finding people who are showing up in this way, who are having the impact like I want to have in the world, who are asking similar questions, who are defining success in unconventional ways, all of these things. And what is that for you? I mean, here's an idea that I talk about in my book is creating your own personal board of directors.
Hmm.
And it can be the example I give is with people I've never met in my whole life. Like, as an example, Brene Brown and Michelle Obama are both on there, as is Anthony Bourdain. He's no longer with us, and I had never met him when he was living. But what I ask myself is, well, who, and what people are the high watermark for authenticity and courage and purpose and the things that I stand for and my work in the world stands for, so that I could literally, I guess it's the same as saying, like, what would Michelle Obama do? What would Brene Brown do? What would Simone Biles do? Like, I'm asking myself those questions. What would Ariana Huffington do? I ask myself those questions all the time as a way to stay inspired. So your board of directors can be people you've never met before, but you
Absolutely.
really admire. And or it could be a mix. It could be people in your life and say, would you be on my personal board of directors? I admire where you are. Maybe you're a little further ahead of me in the journey. I want to learn from and be inspired by you. But really think about who those people are and truly find a community that lifts you up and inspires you and is aligned with your values and where you want to head.
I love that. And you are one of those people that I see that is doing it and you're a little further on the journey. And that's why I look up to you and I literally am loving watching your success. If what it does for me is it inspires me that if you can do it and you know how that the tools and you know the ways to do it, that you can share that through, like you said, I may not get a bunch of time with you or with Brene Brown. You call it your board of directors. I say, like, they're my best friends that don't know it yet
I
because
love it.
they're
Yes.
in my car with me. I think about it. And I was just having a conversation with another MEA alumni talking about how Brene Brown was my best friend. And they're like, really? I was like, yes. She's in my car with me. She's in my head. She goes on my walks. I've read all her
Yeah.
books. I've read a lot, like I know so much about her. She knows nothing about me. And I said to them, the thing is she's changed my life. And my husband, Rob, was there at the time. And he said, no, she didn't. You changed your life. What
Mm.
she did was she did the research, she put it out into the world, she made it available. And what I did was take what I learned from her and put it into action.
You had the courage to act, because that's what it takes. It's the courage to take those tiny steps forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add to that, I love that story. Very similar story. Brene was influential along my journey. And I mentioned that in my book as well. And she has a quote. I don't know if I'm going to do the quote justice by saying it perfectly, but it is exactly the reason I wrote my book. She says, share your story because it might just become someone else's survival guide.
I just got goosebumps and my soul was called out. This is the same message I just got, and it was at MEA. And the story was, you need to share your story. I was sitting with Dacher Keltner and Jeff Hamoy, and they said, you need to share your story. And I said, I'm not sure anybody wants to hear my story. What do they care about my story? And they said, that's your ego talking. Instead of thinking it that way, how could your shit help other people?
That. Please.
Yeah.
That.
And so that is the 2x4 that had to hit me against the head when somebody would call me out. And this is why it's important to level up. This is why it's important to put yourself in front of people who will call you on your BS.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, hey, that's your ego speaking. If you're doing it for other people and you're doing it because it's your soul speaking and it's coming from soul because you care for other people, what do you care what other people think? You're doing it because it's something you're putting into the world. It's creation, but you need to have the bravery to do it, to put it forward. And there's so many other reasons and stories that we start telling ourselves because we're actually afraid.
Yeah. That's why I said courage, bravery, courage, all the things that you just said. There's so much truth in that. And our ego does get in the way. Our ego is trying to keep us playing very, very small and safe in a very, comfortable and familiar space. And if we start to turn it, like you said, and think of being in service of something that is so much bigger than you or I, whew, we can do a lot. And that's how I think about it. Like, our stories are in service of changing lives.
Absolutely.
And when I sell books, I mean, listen, this is the other place our ego trips us up. Then you put your story out in the world in whatever format you choose, because I believe you will. I hope you will. And our ego starts to pop up in the craziest ways. And then it's like, yeah, but I'm not a New York Times bestseller. Yeah, but I haven't sold 100,000 copies. Yeah, and I was like, I went through every iteration of that and I went, pause. Has my success currency is impact? And have I impacted souls to date? Absolutely. Does my book connect with people exactly when they need it most? Hell yes.
Yes.
I'm doing my work and it's in service of. So there's so many layers to that onion too. It's forever work, sister. And I hope that you do share your story, because it will be a survival guide and an inspiration guide for so many.
I'm committing to it, and I'm hoping that you'll hold my ass to the fire.
I will, and I will offer my support in any way I can. And I have an amazing book coach who I can introduce you to, because she is the only reason this puppy ever gotten written. And we're working on the workbook, and then we will be working on number 2.
Well, that's what I need to do, is be around, be willing to ask, be willing to to sit in the uncomfort of not knowing. And I think podcasting and public speaking for me were also areas where I grew that strength, because you're not good at public speaking before you start doing it. You're not good at podcasting when you first start doing it. It's a fucking first time, an FFT.
Totally.
Right? And so those are the things that we have to recognize. Why would you be good at it? Right?
Yeah.
But you surround yourself with other people who are doing it, who don't mind saying, hey, this is what I did to avoid this. This is what I did. This is what the podcast is actually for. I love bringing leaders like you that share their stories, how you learned the hard way, what you wish you would have known earlier. What wisdom do you have now that you didn't have earlier? Because I think if we know better, we can do better. Some of us like to learn the hard way. We need pain. We need a rusty nail. Some of us just need a little tack. Some of us need, a jackhammer nail going through us before we're going to actually get off of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. The 2x4.
Absolutely. So
Totally.
this is the point where I like to ask my guests, if you could talk to your younger self, what would you tell yourself? Because we have some younger listeners that are trying to avoid the pain. They're trying to avoid, living by other people's success scripts and just trying to come up and be their authentic self. What would you tell your younger self?
I would say, trust your soul, listen deeply, and believe that you can also be your best mentor.
That is so good. What do you wish you had done earlier? Maybe not regrets, but just something that you wish that your soul did speak to you earlier, but you didn't listen. Because I have many of those examples. My soul spoke. I just didn't listen. And I wasn't in tune with it.
Well, as you know, mine did too. And in the book, I call out the different time frames of my life. The first of which was when I was 26 years old. And for context, I didn't leave Harley in my corporate career until I was 46 years old. So I was definitely getting these soul nudges. In some cases, they were stronger than nudges. I was getting sick. My body was crying uncle on me. I guess I wish I would have listened more deeply. And I'm very much at peace with the way things played out. I mean, I always say I had the most incredible corporate career. And I'm not telling people to quit. I'm just telling people to make sure that they are in alignment and that they are creating success in a way that feels energizing for them. And so I really wish I would have had a better understanding of what success meant to me and what I was really chasing. But my path was that I wasn't meant to figure that out until I was in my 40s, and to really live it until I was in my 50s. And so I think it's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, because I'm 54 and I'm like I most likely have a lot of years left on this planet. And I don't want a day to go by that I don't lean into this work and this mission that I'm on. But I don't have any regrets.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually the things that we regret are the things we didn't do. And based on the research, the World Regret Survey, the regrets we generally have are the things we wish we had done. So that will help guide what you're rebelling for as well. Thinking about what would my regrets be if I don't do this now, or if I wasn't afraid, what would I do? Those are the things that you're going to want to rebel for, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I talk about the top regrets of the dying all the time. And if you haven't read that book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, by Bronnie Ware, palliative care nurse who sat at on the deathbeds and asked these questions to hundreds of dying patients. And it's really powerful. It just puts it right in front of you. And, the number one regret of the dying is I wish I would have lived a life true to me, not the life others expected of me.
Yep.
And that is at the heart and soul of the work that I do in the world and what I want for everyone.
I love that. So say the name of the book again for the listeners.
It's The Top Regrets of the Dying.
Okay.
by Bronnie, Bronnie, Ware, Ware.
Okay. The other one I have on regret is Daniel Pink's The Power of Regret. And
Yeah.
and he goes through the world and has the studies and same kinds of things. And it is incredible to hear how it can actually propel you forward by knowing that. And I think it really does lead you down the path of what matters most to you, because that emotion is a powerful one. And we can't change the past, but what we can do is change the future by what matters most and what do we want to accomplish? What do we want to feel like? What do we want to show up like? What will we regret if we don't take that risk, be brave, show up as our authentic selves, and just we don't know we have 50 more years, right? My mom died at 52, which for me is next year, right? So I think none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. So if today was our last day, what would we regret not doing?
Oh, amen. I always say tomorrow is a gift, not a guarantee. My dad dropped of a stroke at 71, 2 short years, maybe a year and a half after he retired from full-time corporate executive work, and he was still sitting on 6 boards. So arguably he wasn't retired. And their whole, my parents' whole sail off into the sunset retirement dream just went up. Oof, my dad is very brain damaged, not able to care for himself, wheelchair bound, all the things. I mean, he lives a nice, simple life, but it's not the retirement they expected. We do not know. Nothing is guaranteed. So these questions are potent and powerful and life-changing.
Yeah. And you don't have to wait to be hit across the head with a 2x4 or sit
Please
on it.
don't.
Yeah, please listen.
Don't.
Yes. And that is why we're here. I'm just so grateful. I'm looking forward to get to be on this journey with you. I hope to be able to come to one of your workshops at MEA, or maybe even, be on the journey of writing my first book, getting some feedback. And I know I get to see you in May in Santa Fe, so I'm really excited for that.
I'm so excited to hug you and meet you. This will be very exciting. And to all the things, I have no doubt that we're on this journey together and our paths are going to cross many times. And however I can support. I love this conversation. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for taking the time and for creating the space for people to, and just for being so vulnerable. In your book, you lay it out like not many people have the courage to lay out what you laid out in that book. And I'm just going to tell people, if you're offended by the F word, you probably aren't listening to the podcast, but if you are, it's probably not the book for you. But if you can let somebody be their authentic self and let them have their space, even if it's not your journey, if you can just listen to other people's stories and see where they are, I can guarantee there's gems in here. There's reflective questions. There's things that will make you think and perspectives that will make you challenge your own beliefs and ways of being in the world that might ignite your soul and set your butt on fire in a way that will make you make a change and get out of the rut that you feel stuck in. So read the book. Check out Shelley Paxton on her website. She's got a podcast, Rebel Soul.
It's hopefully coming back at the end of 2024. It's not back yet, but there are probably 85 episodes out there. But yes, I am. That is a commitment to bring that back into the world. So
absolutely,
hopefully before the end of the year.
You have so much wisdom, so much wisdom to share. Where else can people find you in community?
Instagram at Soulbbatical, which is being changed. I just look up Shelley Paxton with an EY. I'm trying to get changed to at the Shelley Paxton. So most likely by the time this airs, that will be changed. Shelley Paxton on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn. It is a space I really adore.
Me too.
And then shelleypaxton.com. My website has all the things about my speaking, my writing, and If you're looking for a speaker to light stages and souls on fire, give me a call.
Oh, I'm going to help you. I want to bring you. I want to bring you to some events. I want to bring you to Idaho, to the Pacific Northwest in some way. I got to have you on stage and be a part of it. So I can't.
We're gonna figure it
We
out.
will. We're conspiring for it, right? The universe is
Yes.
conspiring for this. So
Yes.
well, thank you for your time, and thank you all for listening to the Leader You podcast. If you found this helpful, please share it. Please, there's some message that needs to be passed on, and it can't be passed on if you don't share it. So do your part and send this on to somebody you know that could utilize it, somebody that you know that feels stuck, even if it's not you. So thank you so much.